Sure, George, sure, I got it. Okay, now we're going to see the boss. What you gonna do? I... Lenny thought. His face grew tight with thought. I ain't gonna say nothing, just start stand there. Just gonna I'm not gonna say nothing, just gonna stand there. Good boy, that's swell. You say that over 2-3 times, so you sure won't forget it. Lenny droned to himself softly. I ain't gonna say nothing. I ain't gonna say nothing. I ain't gonna say nothing. Okay, said George, and you ain't gonna do no bad things like you done in weed, neither. Lenny looked puzzled. Like I done in weed? Oh, so you forgot that too, did you? Well, I ain't gonna remind you. Fear you do it again. A light of understanding broke on Lenny's face. They run out of weed, he exploded triumphantly. Run us out of weed, said George disgustedly. We run. They was looking for us, but they didn't catch us. Lenny giggled happily. I didn't forget that. You bet. George lay back on the sand and crossed his hands under his head. Lenny imitated him, raising his head to see whether we were doing it right. God, you're a lot of trouble, said George. I could get along so easy and so nice if I didn't have you on my tail. I could live so easily and maybe have a girl. For a moment, Lenny lay quiet, and then he said hopelessly, We gonna work on a ranch, George. All right, you got that, but we're gonna sleep here before I got a reason. Oh, we're gonna sleep here because I got a reason. The day was going fast now. On the tops of the Gibbeland Mountains, flamed with the light of the sun that had dawned from the valley, a water snake slipped along in the pool, its head held up like a little periscope. The reeds jerked slightly in the current. Far off toward the highway, a man shouting something, and another man shouted back. The sycamore limbs rustled under a little wind that died immediately. George! Why ain't we going on to the ranch? We got some supper. They got supper at the ranch. George rolled on his side. No reason at all for you. I like it here. Tomorrow we're gonna go to work. I see thrashing machines on the way down. That means they'll be bucking grain bags, busting a gun. Tonight I'm gonna lay here and look up. I like it. Lenny got up on his knees and looked down at George. Ain't we gonna have no supper? Sure we are. If you gather up some dead willow sticks, I got 3 cans of beans in my bindle. You got a fire near? You got a fire near? I'll give you a match when you get the sticks together. Then we'll heat the beans and I have supper. Okay. Lenny said, I like beans with ketchup. Ew. Well, we ain't got no ketchup. You go get wood, and don't you fool around. It'll be dark long before long. Lenny lumbered to his feet and disappeared in the brush. George lay where he was and whistled softly to himself. There were sounds of splashing down the river in the direction Lenny had taken. George stopped whistling and listened. Poor bastard, he said softly, and then went on whistling again. In a moment, Lenny came crashing back through the brush. He carried one small willow stick in his hand. George sat up. All right, he said brusquely. Give him that mouse. But Lenny made an elaborate pantomime of innocence. What mouse, George? I ain't got no mouse. George held out his hand. Come on, give it to me. You ain't putting nothing over. Lenny hesitated, backed away, looked widely at the brush line as though he contemplated running for his freedom. George said coldly, you ain't gonna give me that mouse, or do I have to sock you? Give you what, George? You know goddamn well what. I want that mouse. Lenny reluctantly reached into his pocket. His voice broke a little. I don't know why I can't keep it. It ain't nobody's mouse. I didn't steal it. I found it lying right beside the road. George's hand remained outstretched imperiously. slowly like a terrier who doesn't want to bring a ball to his master. Lenny approached the drawback, approached again. George snapped his fingers sharply, and at the sound, Lenny laid the mouse in his hand. "I wasn't doing nothing bad with it, George, just stroking it." George stood up and threw the mouse as far as he could into the darkening brush, and then he stepped to the pool and washed his hands. "You crazy fool, don't you think I could see your feet was wet where you went across the river to get it?" He heard Lenny's whimpering cry and wheeled about, blubbering like a baby. "Jesus Christ, a big guy like you?" Lenny's lip quivered and tears started in his eyes. "Oh, Lenny." George put his hand on Lenny's shoulder. "I ain't taking it away just for meanness. That mouse ain't fresh, Lenny. And besides, you broke it petting it. You got another mouse that's fresh, and I'll let you keep it a little while." Lenny sat down on the ground and hung his head dejectedly. "I don't know where there is no other mouse. I remember a lady used to give 'em to me over one she got, but that lady ain't here." George scoffed. "Lady, huh? Don't even remember who that lady was. That was your own Aunt Clara, and she stopped giving 'em to you. You always killed 'em." Lenny looked sadly up at him. "They were so little," he said apologetically. "I'd pet 'em, and pretty soon they'd bite my fingers, and I pinched their heads a little, and then they was dead, because they was so little. I wished we'd got the rabbits pretty soon, George. They ain't so little. The hell with the rabbits, and you ain't to be trusted with no live mice. Your Aunt Clara gave you a rubber mouse, and you wouldn't have nothing to do with it." "It wasn't no good to pet," said Lenny. The flame of the sunset lifted from the mountain tops, and dusk came into the valley, and the half-darkness came in along the willows and the sycamores. A big carp rose to the surface of the pool, gulped air, and then sank mysteriously into the dark water again, leaving widening rings on the water. Overhead, the leaves whisked again, and the little puffs of willow cotton blew down and landed on the pool's surface. "You gonna get that wood?" George demanded. "There's plenty right up against the back of the sycamore. Floodwater wood. Now you get it." Lenny went behind the trees and brought out a litter of dried leaves and twigs. He threw them in the heap on the old ash pile and went back for more and more. It was almost night now. The dove's wings whistled over the water. George walked to the fire pile and lighted the dry leaves. The flame cracked up among the twigs and fell to the work. George undid his bindle and brought out 3 cans of beans. He stood them about the fire, closing against the blaze, but not quite touching the flame. "There's enough beans for 4 men, George said. Lenny watched him over the fire. Lenny watched him from over the fire. He said patiently, "I like him with ketchup." Who does that? No offense. "Well, we ain't got any," George exploded. "Whatever we ain't got, that's what you want. God Almighty, if I was alone, I could live so easy. I could get a job and work and no trouble. No mess at all. And when the end of the month came, I could take a $50 and go into town and get whatever I want. Why? I could stay in a cat house all night and could eat any place I want. Hotel or any place, and order any damn thing I could think of. And I could do all that every damn month. Get a gallon of whiskey, or sit in a pool room and play cards, or shoot pool." Lenny knelt and looked over the fire at the angry George, and Lenny's face was drawn with terror. "And what I got?" George went on furiously. "I got you! You can't keep a job, and you lose me ever job I get. Just keep me shoving all over the country all the time. And that ain't the worst. got you get in trouble. You do bad things and I got to get you out. His voice rose nearly to a shout. You crazy son of a bitch, you keep me in hot water all the time. He took on the elaborate manner of little girls when they are mimicking one another. Just wanted to feel that girl's dress, just wanted to pet it like it was a mouse. Well, how the hell did she know you just wanted to feel her dress? She jerks back and you hold on like it was a mouse. She yells and we got to hide in an irrigation ditch, all with you guys looking for us. Oh, jeez. And we got to sneak out in the dark and get out of the country. All the time, something like that, all the time. I wishn't I could put you in a cage with about 1,000,000 mice and let you have fun. His anger left him, and suddenly he looked across the fire at Lenny's anguished face, and then he looked ashamedly at the fire. It was quite dark now, but the fire lighted the trunks of the trees and the curving branches overhead. Lenny crawled slowly and cautiously around the fire until he was close to George. He sat back on his heels. George turned the bean can so that another side faced the heat. He pretended to be unaware of Lenny, so close beside him. George? Very softly, no answer. George! What do you want? I was only fooling, George. I don't want no ketchup. I wouldn't eat no ketchup if I was right here beside me. If it was right here beside me. If it was here, you could have had some. But I wouldn't eat none, George. I leave it all for you. You could cover your beans with it, and I wouldn't touch none of it. George still stared morosely at the fire. When I think of the swell time I could have without you, I go nuts. I never get no peace. Lenny still knelt. He looked off into the darkness across the river. George, you want I should go away and leave you alone? Where the hell you gonna go? Where the hell could you go? Well, I could go off in the hills there, someplace. I'd find a cave. Jeez. Yeah? How'd you eat? You ain't got sense enough to find nothing to eat. I'd find things, George. I don't need no nice food with ketchup. I'd lay out in the sun and nobody'd hurt me. And if I found a mouse, I could keep it. Nobody'd take that away from me.